This is Season 3, Episode 13 of my Modular Journey, and today I'm going to take on the impossible task of investigating and understanding the Make Noise Wogglebug module. Make Noise Wogglebug voltage generator came in around mid-November of 2022 with that same batch that came in a year ago. Wogglebug costs around $249, and the general description of this is it is quite a famous random voltage generator. It's been around for quite a while. Originally designed by Grant Richter of Weird Synthesizers, I think that's how you pronounce that, which is a continuation of the smooth and stepped fluctuating random voltage sources pioneered by Don Buchla's Model 265 Source of Uncertainty, which I know nothing about. The Wogglebug adds what they refer to as otherworldly Woggle CVs, stepped voltages with decaying sinusoid edges. I don't even know what the hell that means. This sounds like a medical experiment gone wrong. It is touted as being a very musical random voltage generator by synchronizing all random signals to a master clock. It is important that I state right up front that this is not going to be a deep dive or a tutorial of how to use Wogglebug, but merely a reason for purchasing the module and my personal exploration. I'm sure this thing goes wildly deep, but to keep this video at a reasonable length and to keep my sanity in check, I'm only here to discuss my intentions with the Wogglebug. So a quick list of some features from the manual. The manual says the features of the Wogglebug are a complex random voltage system. No externals are needed. It has 2 VCOs, a phase lock loop, a lag processor, a clock, a burst generator, and sample and hold. It can generate 7 random simultaneous output signals and has a voltage controlled master clock. There are external inputs for sample and hold and RingMod influence. There is a disturb button, which of course sounds fun to me. The panel has 3 sections on the Wogglebug: audio, CV, and clock. But before I go into all these sections, let me get it in the rack and power it up, because I think we're going to just make noise with it as we go. Make noise, get it? Make noise. All right. All right, Wogglebug is mounted. Let's get our power turned on. I'm going to kick on the sequencer rack down here as well, because I plan to use data. Not entirely sure what for, but you might see this hole right here. This hole is where Wogglebug normally lives, but he's up here for now. Okay, so the first thing to talk about is the audio section up here, and this is, of course, audio rate outputs, smooth, RingMod, and something called a Woggle VCO. Let's take a listen to what the smooth output sounds like. So this smooth output here says it is a Sharkfin wave at audio rate, which is controlled by the ego input, which is a jack right here, the ego id knob, which is this knob right here. It is influenced by the influence CV right here, and it is also influenced by the controls down here, the speed and burst, the chaos section. So let's stick this guy into data. So there's our Sharkfin. Hey, looks like a shark fin. Can you see that? So I kind of think that this is not going to be a top to bottom type talk through, because you need everything to make something else work. So this is just going to kind of be chaotic, which you're probably used to with all my other videos. And we're going to turn up the volume a bit here. And now the manual states that this is influenced by the ego id knob, so we're going to turn this knob a little bit. And then we're going to turn up the speed and chaos controls down here. So you kind of hear some movement happening. Now, before I get going on this, let me just say shit goes off the rails almost instantly with this module, which is why I haven't used it as an audio source, like for pitches or musicality. I kind of use it for noise or for modulating things like filters or envelopes or something else. You know, twiddling knobs on ensemble, for instance. Because this thing goes from 0 to crazy in like a second. So then if I take some external force and try to incorporate it into here, like let's say I take a sample and hold from Modbox, running relatively fast, throw it into influence. Anyway. There you go. Insanity immediately. So let me hop over to this thing called RingMod real quick. I'll turn everybody back down, try to get myself under control again, get rid of my influences. Let me widen this a little bit so you can kind of see what RingMod sound is going to sound like coming out of this thing. Let's get a balanced id ego. And so now this is just Wogglebug again working internally. What does this say in the manual? This says it is described as a pulse wave at audio rate, ring modulated from smooth VCO, Woggle VCO, and an audio rate signal coming into the influence jack if it's used. So you want an audio rate. We want an audio rate signal coming into the influence jack. So we're going to take something from Chainsaw just sitting over here. I have to pull down the volume in my mixer so I can turn this up a little. So the manual also states it gets messy really fast, and they're not kidding. I mean, as soon as you start messing with this clock section, things get really crazy. So again, this is just audio signals. Turning it more to the ego side kind of calms it down a little bit. Not much. Yeah, so I'm not going to be building any masterpieces with the RingMod output necessarily until I learn how to control it a little better. If that's even possible, I don't know. I don't know if this is even possible to control. Over here at the Woggle output, we have a square wave that it's at audio rate, and it's controlled by the Woggle knob down here. The ego input, which is up here. The ego id balance knob, which is here. And the CV and the influence CV input, which is here. Oh, and the clock rate, of course, the clock controls. All right, without any influence, let's listen. Bring up the id ego so we can hear it a little bit. Bring up the speeds. So it starts moving around a little. Now we'll bring up the Woggle knob. If I step up the clock, I guess the ego input can be anything, so let's take something else instead. Let's take a couple of sine waves out of Batumi here. Well, let's just pop them in individually and just see how they affect the sound. We're getting into droid territory here. So if I turn the Woggle knob all the way down, we're hearing what the raw sound sounds like. But as soon as you add some of this woggle, it starts to smooth things out a little bit. Sort of. If I self-patch this guy, like take the Woggle output into the CV input, what does that do? Ah, we're starting to gain some control. So if you want more control, I guess you turn it over to the ego side. So I did a musical piece a couple weeks ago, I think it was, where I used the Wogglebug to drive some noise in the rack. And it wound up building an entire piece out of just whatever Wogglebug was doing. And it was doing something kind of like this, where it was using bursts and not really the audio out, but at least the burst stuff out to drive some other modules. And it sounded pretty cool. So I think the higher you go to the id side is where Wogglebug starts leaving the rails, so to speak. I'm not even sure if patching this itself is doing anything. I guess it does. I guess it kind of reins it in. I guess it's also important, I should have mentioned earlier, but I skipped it, was one of the things the manual states is consider that many of the changes in the system are not immediate, which you just witnessed. This is because the Wogglebug is a complex feedback system where several sub-circuits are responding to each other. So in that, when I'm changing things, you don't hear an immediate change. Like a few seconds later, something changes. Anyway, so there is the 3 audio outputs, and it has also kind of demonstrated what some of these inputs do. All right, so if I come out of here to the stepped jack, you can see it's stepped mode. So now here is what the stepped mode is doing, based on where you have the knob set for id and ego. And then there's also a smooth output. So smooth would probably be what you think it's going to be. It's going to be a stepped with slew. It sounds like a Tony Banks solo. And then last but not least, we do have our blessed little woggle output, and I don't even know what to expect here. The second woggle output outputs a sum of the smooth and stepped CVs, and the manual dramatically states that this voltage quivers, shakes, and chases after the heart of the system, and it is smoothed by the woggle knob. So let's hear what this sounds like. So this is going off the rails already. So let's smooth that out with this woggle knob, shall we? And again, when the knob is turned to the ego side, it tends to fall off and be more mellow. And I think you can even get it to go to nothing if you turn the ego knob all the way down. The Wogglebug just fades to its lowest voltage. But let's switch over to the id side, shall we? We'll turn off the woggle. So this is 0 to 10 volts. Kind of going apeshit. I mean, this might make some interesting sounds in the background of a track, right? Turning up some reverb, letting it bark away. Let's turn up that woggle knob. And it's adding some of the smoothness back in. Quivers, shakes, and chases after the heart of the system. Very dramatic. And finally, the clock section down here, which you've seen me playing with throughout the whole video. It is an attenuator for speed chaos CV right here, or it also has its own built-in, I think 8 volt. If there's nothing jacked in, I think you still get 8 volts of sweep here that you get to play with. There's an external clock in down here with the clock LED right next to it. You can see it blinking away. And that's because, again, the clock is currently turned up. The speed and chaos control knob this has dual purpose. This sets the rate of the Wogglebug internal clock generator, which you can see right here, ... And it is also the lag processor feeding the smooth CV circuit. Turning this knob counterclockwise slows the system and smooths the responses, and turning it clockwise speeds up the system and causes the smooth CV to become jittery. So the burst output activity window on this side, this is a square random gate signal synced to the clock, internal or external, influenced by the stepped, smooth, and woggle values at a 0 to 10 volt range. And the activity window, of course, represents these random gates. So, of course, because this is a clock attenuator, the higher it goes, the more bursty it gets. Then, of course, there is a clock out, which comes out of the Wogglebug to clock anything else around it. This clock out is not influenced by anybody. It's just a simple pass-through. If you have a clock going in, that's the clock that comes out. And then, of course, there is the internal clock LED right here, which is the tempo of what's going on here, or the timing of what's going on inside. Why I chose the Wogglebug as one of my many random voltage generators. If you've been paying attention to my entire journey, you know that random is my favorite thing ever in all of modular, and Wogglebug was on this wish list for some time, but seemed more complex than I could grasp for a long while. It still is, to be honest. Finally, a year ago now, I picked up the Wogglebug and stuck it in near my Make Noise modules. And honestly, it just sat there blinking at me all year. I've been so damn busy with life and the day job and everything else going on that it's just been a little bit of a ridiculous year so far. But anyway, owning a Wogglebug seems almost as much of a rite of passage in modular as owning maths, which I also do now. As for how I plan to use it, it's got 7 random outputs. It's got smooth RingMod woggle, stepped smooth woggle 2, and burst. 7 outputs. If I can't find something to do with those 7 outputs, then I need to sell all my stuff. I think we've reached the end of this because this has been a little bit of a cattywampus episode. I didn't mean to jump all over the place, but I did do the description and the audio and the panel walkthrough and some sound demo, and then wrapped it up with how I plan to use it, which is a little bit out of order of what I'm used to doing. There's really not much more I can say about Wogglebug until I learn it a little bit better. Maybe there is no getting control of this monster. I don't know. Because this is... this is the sound going on inside my head day to day anyway, so maybe that's why I love it so much. Is this music to you? Let me know. Anyway, that is it for the Make Noise Wogglebug module and episode 13. Coming up next, I guess we're going to talk about Tempe. Since we're talking about Make Noise, let's go talk about Tempe. So stay tuned for that. Wow.